Newt Gingrich is joining us now, of course, 45th Speaker of the House, author of Vengeance and Understanding Trump. This midterm election cycle coming up have a lot of folks concerned because of the way the map is and the energy on the side of the resistance, specifically with female challengers in open seats. Democrat female challengers, we're seeing quite a differential. Speaker Gingrich joins us now. Newt, how you doing? Good to talk to you.
Well, I'm doing very well, and I think you have two really important topics in the question of Trump testifying and in the whole question of what happens in November, which will really be decisive in a lot of ways. I mean, if the Republicans lose the House, the next 2 years of the Trump administration are going to be very difficult. And virtually every senior Trump appointee can expect to spend about half their time testifying in front of various committees that are hostile and that are trying to trap them. So there's a lot at stake in November in this election, particularly on the House side. I think the Senate's going to end up being fine.
I said the other night on Fox in my angle, Newt, that especially women voters, I think they want things to calm down. I think that things become too frenetic. Women get off-put by it. When I say calm down, the economy is doing well, but the constant sense of frenetic reaction, and I think for a lot of women are kind of in the middle, they're turned off by that. And so my message to the White House is tout the economy, talk about how, real world examples of how this economy is building wealth and opportunity, and remind all voters, especially women, that the Democrats get the gavel. It's really going to be chaotic, really chaotic investigations, impeachment, and a reversal of all of our economic gains.
Yes, I think that's part of it. I also think that if the Republicans run a big choice election, I mean, just take the issue of open borders versus controlling the border. 84% of the country believes that sanctuary cities increase the likelihood of crime. Virtually every woman believes that she does not want MS-13 in her neighborhood. She doesn't want MS-13, the El Salvadorian gang, in her children's schools. But at the same time, she's not comfortable with how children are handled at the border. So the question becomes, what's the election about? And I think that if the Republicans are passive, if we allow the news media and the left to define the election, we'll lose the House. If we run a very aggressive Reagan-style campaign and we clarify what the choice is, we could have as big a shock on election night 2018 as we had on election night 2016. But that requires a Republican Party that's willing to be tough, it's willing to fight, and it's willing to actually stand for something that it's willing to go to the mat on. And if they try to appease the left, or they try to appease the consultants and run some kind of amorphous campaign, they'll just lose. Trump's too polarizing a figure for us to be able to do anything except win the polarity. And that's an old Margaret Thatcher rule. Lady Thatcher used to say, first you win the argument, then you win the vote. And this is going to be one of those elections where that's as true as any election in American history.
Michael Steele, former RNC chief, said this today about what the president's feelings are about the midterms.
Looking at the way the president has approached Republicans, he's largely agnostic as to who controls the House and, quite frankly, the Senate. The president doesn't really give a damn about this legislative process. The better foil for him coming out of 2018 is to spend the next 18 months haranguing against Nancy Pelosi or whomever is the Speaker of the House under Democratic control and setting them up as the narrative for his reelection.
Your reaction to that?
Well, I just think that's totally wrong. I think, first of all, if you watch Trump's travel schedule, including going to Ohio for a congressional candidate, and you look at how much time and energy he's putting into rallies and trying to encourage people to elect Republicans to the Senate, to governorships, I mean, how clearly he understands that the Democratic Party now is the radical extremist party in which the radical extremist wing is gradually beating the progressive wing. He's not going to get much done legislatively if he ends up with a Democratic House, and they're going to spend all day, every day, in investigations, and they're going to try to bring in every single cabinet officer and sub-cabinet officer and have hearings and try to track them on perjury, and it will be a nightmare. I mean, you have a hard left, bitter Democratic Party, which if it gets control of the House, is going to do everything it can to make life miserable for the president and his entire administration. So I think Michael Steele's just plain wrong. I think Trump very much wants to see a Republican victory, and I think that he plans to work very hard to have that happen.
The left is very excited today because Barack Obama has announced his list of candidates he's endorsing ahead of the midterms. Ocasio-Cortez is not one of them. However, he is endorsing a slate of candidates. How important may that be for the Democrats?
Well, you would assume that the former Democratic president would endorse everybody who won a Democratic primary. I mean, it's his interest to just try to rebuild the Democratic Party and to try to have them gain some lost ground. Mm-hmm. Under Obama, the Democrats lost a record number of state legislative seats. They're close to a record number of losses in governorships. They lost the Senate and they lost the House. So he's got a lot of work to do just to get back to even. And he's a Democratic president. I fully expect him to be for Democrats.
Do you think that the move to the left, how radical the Democrats seem to be, obviously abolish ICE, and I call them the Dem-Tifas now because they're adopting a lot of the Antifa tactics, at least in resistance. So do you think that that's going to turn off some of these swing voters? Because I can't imagine independents love blockading the ICE offices in Portland, Oregon, or tying yourself up with these black masked freaks at these at these Occupy ICE events.
Look, I think if you look at any series of videos and say to yourself, is this the kind of America we want to become? About 85% of the country would say no. And that's why that's why I'm more optimistic about the fall campaign than a lot of people, because I think when it gets into, when it's fully clear what the choice is, they are really becoming a radical party, a party of people who are enthusiastic about hatred, and a party of people who have values that are repudiated by most Americans. I think a real test case is going to be Minnesota, which used to be a pretty strong Democratic state. But Keith Ellison, the congressman, is running up there for attorney general, and he goes around, say, wearing an open borders T-shirt. Well, there's no state in the country that has more than 20 or 25% of the people favoring open borders. And I think if the Republicans have the nerve to go straight at it and say, your choice is enforce the border, have legal immigration, but also ensure that you don't have criminals in our cities and ensure that you know who's coming across the border, versus the Feinstein bill for open borders, which every single Democratic senator has co-sponsored. So whether you're Menendez in New Jersey, or your Heitkamp in North Dakota, you have co-sponsored an open borders bill you can't defend. And the Republicans have to slow the campaign down. I'm trying to get every Republican Senate candidate just go around your state and carry a copy of that bill and wave it at every event and say, here's the bill, here's what they signed, here's what it would do. Do you really want to have open borders so 150 million people could come to the U.S. next year?
Well, I think, again, the millions upon millions upon millions of people who would make their way into the United States, I mean, these are not going to be people voting like Adam Smith Republicans. I mean, not with a public school system that turns them against the American founding and the American tradition. I mean, so we've got to be very careful about how we do the whole immigration deal now, given the public schools. President Trump was on with Rush Limbaugh yesterday and said the following.
It's like pulling teeth, though. Getting these guys to get it done is, and you have no idea how tough I've been. And I say, hey, if you have a shutdown, you have a shutdown. Now, the shutdown can also take place after the election. I happen to think it's a great political thing because people want border security.
And he's frustrated that Congress, it is amazing having both houses of Congress, yet no enforcement increases that I can see and no ending of these loopholes that allow people to come into the country and not be turned back almost immediately.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, look, if you watch what's beginning to happen in Europe, where they're beginning to develop ways of making sure that people never legally enter the country, so you never get involved in this complicated mess. And instead they just block them and they say, no, you're not coming in, because they're faced with horrendous numbers potentially coming across, particularly from sub-Saharan Africa. And they recognize that this is a flood they can't possibly cope with. Well, we're in the same boat, except that our news media has tried to intimidate us so we can't have an honest conversation. If the president makes the issue a choice between open borders and border security, he wins. If it's only a fight over the wall, he probably loses, because if you just say to people, where are you on the wall, that's one tone. If you say to people, if your choice is not controlling the border, not having ICE, not ending sanctuary cities, and having people like MS-13 gangs in your neighborhood, or doing what it takes to control the border and protect America, then we win. I did a paper in which I outlined that by something like 60% of people agree with us on our weakest position, and 84% agree with us on our strongest position. And the liberal media does everything they can to intimidate Republicans into not hanging tough and just being firm on this.
Newt Gingrich, thank you so much for your perspective. Love having you on. You have a great rest of the day.